Good morning. This is Bill Scher on the Liberal Oasis radio show, WHMP News, Information, and the Arts. Very fascinating week in politics. I think a consequential week as far as our influence. By our, I mean the liberal community's influence in the national discourse. We had a week that started off with the alleged Bittergate, something that the pundit class bloviated on for several days because all these multimillionaire pundits know exactly what rural America is thinking at any given moment. They got a pipeline into the heartland of America. They were convinced that this was the downfall of the Obama candidacy. They quoted right-wing extraordinaire Grover Norquist prominently saying this is going to cost him the election. And what happened? No movement in the national polls at all, and apparently no movement or very little movement in the Pennsylvania polls. And that, I don't think that doesn't necessarily speak to Obama as a candidate. I think it speaks to the disconnect that the media has with what is actually on the minds of voters. So you might think after that there'd be some soul searching within the media class, that maybe we should get focused on actual issues that voters care about, the economy, healthcare, education, energy, Iraq foreign policy in general. But then we had a debate on ABC on Wednesday where the entire first hour of that debate had nothing to do with those issues. And their justification was, well, these are the things that voters really vote on. They vote on lapel pins. They vote on extremely strained ties to terrorist activities 40 years ago. That's what they do. We have a journalistic obligation to discuss these things. So what happened after that debate? I actually saw on MSNBC Chuck Todd say right afterwards, this is going to be terrible for Obama because now the media is going to do 72 hours of stories about this guy Bill Ayers, who Obama's crossed paths with a few times, who was in the Weather Underground 40 years ago, and that's going to be terrible for Obama. But that's not what has happened. What happened was you had thousands of people besiege ABC to say, you moderated an awful debate with ridiculous questions that are not about what I care about. So much so that ABC was compelled to run a story on World News Tonight with Charlie Gibson being the moderator of the debate and the anchor of World News Tonight. They had to do an entire story on Thursday night about how many people hated their debate. And that is the debate du jour on all the other talking head shows. That is indicative of the great power that we have. This is not about Obama partisans versus Clinton partisans. The outrage of the debate was not about you were being mean to my favorite candidate. It was about you did a crappy debate. You are treating issues, you're treating non-issues as issues and cheapening the entire discourse. Now, and that whole question, this is particularly interesting, that whole question about William Ayers. And keep in mind now, this alleged connection was hashed out in an article by the Politico, which is a relatively new political online magazine that, trust me, everyone in media circles reads. Anyone who is covering the campaign for a living reads the Politico and knew the Politico did this story a couple months ago, several weeks ago. And every other traditional media outlet looked at that story and clearly concluded there's no real story here. This is really, really strained because no one ran follow-up stories on it. But when George Stephanopoulos, who co-moderated the debate with Charlie Gibson, he was on fellow ABC radio host Sean Hannity's program, Sean Hannity being one of the more prominent right-wing radio show hosts. Sean Hannity said, "Are you going to ask a question about Bill Ayers?" And George Stephanopoulos said, you can find this audio online, I won't bore you with it today. Stephanopoulos said, I'm taking notes now. And why did Stephanopoulos do that? Is because Stephanopoulos is some secret right-winger who has it in for Obama? No. Stephanopoulos thinks that conservative radio hosts speak for the heartland. They speak for the heartland, and him and his fellow liberal media elites do not. So I have to listen to Sean Hannity and get what he thinks is important. And taking that flag pin question, you might have noticed they had an actual voter. You know, they wouldn't say that question themselves, but real voters are asking, why don't you wear the flag pin? I don't think you're not patriotic, but I really love flag pins. I really want you to wear one. They didn't just randomly stumble across this person while culling for votes on the streets of Western Pennsylvania. She was quoted in a New York Times story a couple weeks ago. So they said, we want to get a question about flag pins. We're too pathetic to ask it ourselves. Let's stick it in this person's mouth because we know she'll ask it. They made the equation that this is what the heartland is thinking, and we must ask the heartland questions. Well, guess what? There are a lot of people in the heartland, and they're not all right-wingers. And so when you had thousands of people besiege ABC and said your questions were lame and ridiculous and irrelevant to what's actually important of this election, they had to recalibrate. Say, wait a second. Maybe Sean Hannity doesn't have a beeline to the heartland's way of thinking. Maybe there's other people in this country that actually care about if they're going to be able to pay their mortgage off, pay for health care, pay for college. Want their sons and daughters or sons and daughters of their friends and families to get out of Iraq. So there is a moment here that we should recognize that we have a voice. We are not inherently marginalized in the nation's discourse. The media has tried to marginalize us. They've tried to say that you and I don't live in the heartland and only conservatives do. And therefore, we will listen to them and not take your question seriously. But when we speak up in numbers, and because of the internet, because of blogs, we have more ability to do that quickly. It didn't take several days for letters to the editor to pour in. This could be done instantaneously, so people saw within 24 hours what the outrage was. We can keep taking advantage of this, taking advantage of our collective numbers to shape the discourse in a positive way. That is not to say that we should be shaping it just to push our narrow interests, but to say, let us have a debate about actual issues and not have a debate be about trivial, superficial, trumped-up, manufactured outrages that are only being injected into the bloodstream by people with political agendas, not because they're representing what actual voters care about. There's something that I do in my day job for Campaign for America's Future called Weekend Watchdog. I do this in conjunction with Air America's Sam Cedar. On Fridays, if you go to the Campaign for America's Future website at ourfuture.org, I will put up the Weekend Watchdog post, which suggests 3 questions that should be asked on the Sunday talk shows. And then on Sunday at 4 o'clock with Sam Cedar, we'll go back and look at what happened on the Sunday shows and determine if those questions actually got asked or not. And the idea is that we can actually use those questions on Friday, send them into the talk shows, let them know in advance that these are the questions that people want asked. We don't have to just sit back and let Sean Hannity do all this and then just get outraged after the fact. We can be proactive here. We have roles to play. We have voices. We have platforms. These Sunday shows do read their email. I've seen them reference email that they get on their shows. But they have to hear us in loud numbers if we are to make an impact. And we can do that. I think that was shown this week. And in fact, MSNBC's First Read column on their site took notice of this. They are aware that we're out there now. They realize that we are speaking in loud numbers. So don't let this be a one-off. Let's keep this going so we can actually have a debate about real issues going forward in November. This is Bill Scher for the Liberal Oasis radio show at WHMP. News, information, and the arts. Back after this with Will Bunch.